So we just finished our inventory system basic features. So now we have the capability of picking the weapon from ground, plus we can switch inventory items, and we can drop the weapons back to the ground, right? And again we can pick up again as well. Okay, so now I think we have almost implemented those inventory system and other stuff. So I think it's a good time to do some refactorings, optimizations, and some improvements for our existing implementations. So in today's session, actually, we are not going to implement a specific new feature. Instead, what we are going to do is do some refactorings, right? And do some cleanups plus optimizations. Okay, so let's get started. So I think as a first cleanup, we can get rid of this print string, right? It's a very minor thing to do. But my main focus was actually to generalize these component referencing. Right? For example, here what we have been done was at the inventory system actor component, I have been checked for this inventory help actor component exists within this inventory items referenced element. So if it is exists, we can actually go to its variables and refer it out. Okay? So these sort of references are now being at multiple different places in our project. So instead of calling it like this, what we can do is we can create a separate blueprint function library to handle those sort of stuff in a common place. So when we have such generalization, it gives like multiple different benefits. Basically, like we can reuse the functionalities. That's an obvious benefit out of it. Plus, introducing some changes and a debugging process would be easier as well, right? Okay, so first to get started with, what we can do is to create a separate function library to handle those sort of utilities, right? So I think currently we have a one blueprint function library called BFL utilities, and there we have this trace foreground function. So similarly, I think we can have a set of global functions inside this utility function library, which can be reused later on. Okay. So first, let's find the references globally and see what are the places that we can do some refactorings. So here you can see, like in pickable item base, we have this inventory system get component, and inside the weapon base we have this weapon system get component plus locomotion system get component, and inside the locomotion itself we have locomotion system get component inside the animation blueprint actually, and inside weapon system again we have inside the weapon again we have weapon system, and inside PPC montage helper we have this skeletal mesh get component, but I think this one would be fine. This is just a specific scenario. And finally we have inventory item helper get component inside the inventory system. Okay, so those are the places that we have such references, and I think most places we have this weapon system get component plus locomotion system get component, sort of like a duplicated code. Okay, so let's start with generalizing from this locomotion system onwards, and we'll see how it goes. So inside the BFL utilities, let's create a new function called get locomotion system, right? And this function can be a pure function, right? And then as an input, let's get own, which is an actor, right? And this owner should be an actor reference, right? And as an output, we can return the return value, which is BPC locomotion system object reference, right? Okay. And then first we can check whether we have a valid owner or not. So if we have a valid owner reference, then what we can do is we can get component by class for locomotion system. And if we have this locomotion system component, we can first check actually whether it exists or not by checking its validity. So if this one is valid, then we can return its reference. If not, we are simply returning null reference. So similarly to here, we can return a null reference. So this is our first generalized function. And then let's go to one of its implementation. Yeah, so inside BP weapon base under set function, we have this component, right? Locomotion system get component by class function. So let's get rid of this one and instead let's call for get locomotion system. So now you can see actually this function is globally accessible because this is inside BFL utilities blueprint function library. So whatever the functions that we define inside the blueprint function library is globally accessible, right? Okay, so I got it here and I can simply plug this to here, right? Because only if we have a valid reference, this will return a valid reference, otherwise it's a null reference, right? But maybe here also for safe side actually we can do a is valid check, but it won't be necessary, I guess. But for safe side, let's edit as well, right? And if I press enter again, now we doesn't have that thing anymore at here, right? And the next place is basically inside ABP locomotion anim instance. Here we get this thing here. So what I can do is get rid of this one and call for get locomotion system, and let's get rid of this is valid from here and check it at here, right? So if it is valid, we can simply set this one. If not, we are return from the function. Compile and save all. Okay, now let's check for others as well. Okay, so this is actually from blueprint function utilities, so we don't need to replace it, right? So I think get locomotion system actor component by class is generalized now. So let's play a test and see whether everything works properly. Yep, everything works as intended. No errors. Great. Right. So as the next step, I think we can generalize this weapon system stuff, right? So similarly, we can do it quite similar to this get locomotion system. So I will get a duplicate out of it. And I'll name it as get weapon system, right? And one thing to make sure that when you take some duplicate out of the existing function, or even if you copy some function within this blueprint function libraries, sometimes it may add this world context input parameter by default, right? So I don't know exactly why they add it by default when you duplicate a function. But anyway, if you keep this parameter inside some of your blueprint function libraries, it may cause an issue when you're trying to build the game, right? So therefore, in order to avoid such issues in future, make sure to remove these sort of input parameters from your function libraries, right? Function library functions. Okay, so I just removed that automatically added parameter. Now I have this function. So here, instead of using locomotion system, let's get the weapon system. And also, instead of returning the locomotion system, let's return the weapon system. Compile and save. Okay, right. So let's go and find the places where we used weapon system. Okay, so inside BP weapon base again, inside this BPI pick item interface function, we have used this thing here. So instead of using it like that, let's get weapon system instead and use it here. Compile and save. And save. Okay. And then inside BP weapon, again we have this BPC weapon system. So let's get rid of it. And let's call for get weapon system. Right, so make sure to connect these target pins properly, otherwise it will give some compiler errors. Right, I think that's all. And one thing to do, like we can actually organize this into a category called the subsystems, so it will be much organized. Okay, and then let's go for let's go for the inventory system. So again, we have to do the same process. Let's just copy and paste it, and let's rename it to get inventory system. And by default, it added this world context input parameter, so I don't want to include it within my function, so I will get rid of it. And as the component, it should be inventory system, and the return value type should be inventory system object reference. Okay, and then let's go to the go to one of its implementation, and let's replace this one. So inside the BP pickable item base, we have this inventory system reference at the on component begin overlap. So I'll get rid of it and add inventory system. And inside, yeah, the BFL utility is actually, this is our globally defined function. So let's organize into the subsystem as well. Yes, and I think that's all for inventory system. And we have helper function level components, right? But let's first and see whether we covered all the systems, subsystems. So we covered inventory subsystem, locomotion subsystem, and weapon system. But I think it is nice to implement a sort of a function similar to those reusable function to user interface system as well. So later on, actually, we can reuse that function inside multiple different instances. Right. So how to do that? Again, let's go to the BFL utilities and let's duplicate one of these function and let's name it as get user interface system. And the component should be user interface system. Return value should be user interface system object reference, and make sure to get rid of this world context input. Right. So currently I think this one hasn't been used yet, but later on when the time comes we can use it. Okay. So the subsystems are done. Then we have these helpers. So mainly we have two helpers. First one is inventory item helper and the second one is montage help. So the inventory item help has been used at BPC inventory system itself, and montage help. Let's check out reference view. Yeah, and the montage helper has been used at the character base. Yes, at here as a direct reference actually, right? But I think it's nice to create a globally accessible function similar to the subsystems. Later on, actually, it will be really helpful. So you can go for the BFL utilities and I'll duplicate one of its function and let's implement a function called get locomotion system help, right? Because I think we have helper like that. So sorry, it should be actually inventory item helper. Sorry, it was my mistake. uh, Inventory item helper, yeah. And then I'll get rid of this world context. This should be inventory item helper and the return value should be inventory item help object reference. And I'll organize this to a category called maybe helpers, or let's say subsystem helpers, which is much more convenient. And I'll go to here, and instead of using this one, now I can get inventory item helper directly and check for its validity, and if it is valid, I can get the pickable item out of it. Right. And yeah, this one actually we can keep as it is. I guess it would be okay. But for montage helpers, let's duplicate this function. And I'll call it for montage helper. Let's get rid of world context. And this should be montage helper. And the return type should be montage helper object reference. So this one hasn't been used anywhere yet, but later on when the time comes, we can reuse it. Okay. So those are the necessary generalizations or code refactorings that I can see in the current implementation. Plus, we can do some minor changes for our locomotion behaviors. But I think those stuff we can discuss later on because it's a separate part. For now, I think this would be fine, right? So we just did some of the refactorings for existing implementations, right? Okay, so that's it for today's tutorial. I'll see you there. Thank you.